Hafiz Divan, written by Gertrude Bell, narrated by David Hunsdale. Introduction. Shamsuddin Mohammed, better known by his poetical surname of Hafiz, was born in Shiraz in the early part of the 14th century. His names, being interpreted, signify the son of the faith, the praiseworthy, and one who can recite the Quran. He is further known to his compatriots under the titles of the Tongue of the Hidden and the Interpreter of Secrets. The better part of his life was spent in Shiraz, and he died in that city towards the close of the century. The exact date, either of his birth or of his death, is unknown. He fell upon turbulent times. His delicate love songs were chanted to the rude accompaniment of the clash of arms, and his dreams must have been interpreted often enough by the nip of famine in a beleaguered town, the inrush of conquerors, and the flight of the defeated. The history of Persia in the 14th century is exceedingly confused. Beyond a succession of wars and turmoils, there is little to be learnt concerning the political conditions under which Hafiz lived. 50 years before the birth of the poet, Hulagu, a grandson of the great Tartar invader Chinggis Khan, had conquered Baghdad, putting to death the last of the Abbasid caliphs and extinguishing the direct line of the race that had ruled over Persia since 750. For the next 200 years, there is indeed a branch of the family of Abbas living in Cairo, members of which were set up as caliphs by the Mamluk, sultans of Egypt. But they were destitute of any real authority, and their position was that of dependence in the Mamluk court. The sons and grandsons of Hulagu succeeded him as lords of Persia and Mesopotamia, paying a nominal allegiance to the great Khan of the Mongols in Cambaluc or Pekin, but for all practical purposes independent, and the different provinces of their empire were administered by governors in their name. About the time of the birth of Hafiz, that is to say in the beginning of the 14th century, a certain Mahmud Shah Inju was governing the province of Fars, of which Shiraz is the capital, in the name of Abu Sa'id, the last of the direct descendants of Hulagu. On the death of Mahmud Shah, Abu Sa'id appointed Sheikh Hussein ibn Juban to the governorship of Fars, a lucrative and much coveted post. Sheikh Hussein took the precaution of ordering the 3 sons of Mahmud Shah to be seized and imprisoned, but while they were passing through the streets of Shiraz in the hands of their captors, their mother, who accompanied them, lifted her veil and made a touching appeal to the people, calling upon them to remember the benefits they had received from their late ruler, the father of the 3 boys. Her words took instant effect. The inhabitants rose, released her and her sons, and drove Sheikh Hussein into exile. He, however, returned with an army supplied by Abu Sa'id and induced Shiraz to submit again to his rule. In 1335, a year or 2 after these events, Abu Sa'id died, and the power of the house of Hulagu crumbled away. There followed a long period of anarchy, which was brought to an end when Owais, another descendant of Hulagu, seized the throne. He and his son, Ahmed, reigned in Baghdad until Ahmed was driven out by the invading army of Timur. But during the years of anarchy, the authority of the Sultan of Baghdad had been considerably curtailed. On Abu Sa'id's death, Abu Ishaq, one of the 3 sons of Mahmud Shah Inju, who had so narrowly escaped from the hands of Sheikh Hussein, took possession of Shiraz and Isfahan, finally ousting his old enemy, while Muhammad ibn Musafahar, who had earned a name for valor in the service of Abu Sa'id, made himself master of Yezd. From this time onward, the governors of the Persian provinces seem to have given a nominal allegiance now to the Sultan of Baghdad, now to the more distant caliph. The position of Shiraz between Baghdad and Cairo must have resembled that of Venice between Rome and Constantinople, and, like Venice, she was obedient to neither lord. Abu Ishaq had not steered his bark into quiet waters. In 1340, Shiraz was besieged and taken by a rival Atabeg, and the son of Mahmud Shah was obliged to content himself with Isfahan. But in the following year he returned, captured Shiraz by a stratagem, and again established himself as ruler over all Fars. The remaining years of his reign are chiefly occupied with military expeditions against Yezd, where Muhammad ibn Muzaffar and his sons were building up a formidable power. In 1352, determined to put an end to these attacks, Muhammad marched into Fars and laid siege to Shiraz. Abu Ishaq, whose life was one of perpetual dissipation, redoubled his orgies in the face of danger. Uncertain of the fidelity of the people of Shiraz, he put to death all the inhabitants of 2 quarters of the town, and contemplated ensuring himself of a 3rd quarter in a similar manner. But these measures did not lead to the desired results. The chief of the threatened quarter got wind of the king's design and delivered up the keys of his gate to Shah Shuja, son of Muhammad ibn Muzaffar. And Abu Ishaq was obliged to seek refuge a 2nd time in Isfahan. 4 years later, in 1357, he was given up to Muhammad, who sent him to Shiraz and, with a fine sense of dramatic finesse, had him beheaded in an open space before the ruins of Persepolis. The Arab traveller Ibn Battuta, who revisited Shiraz between the years 1340 and 1350, has left a description of its ruler. Abu Ishaq, says he, is one of the best sultans that can be found. It must be confessed that the average of sultans was not very high in Ibn Battuta's time. He is fair of face, imposing of presence, and his conduct is no less to be admired. His mind is generous, his character remarkable, and he is modest, although his power is great and his territories extensive. His army exceeds the number of 30,000 men, Turks, and Persians. The most faithful of his subjects are the inhabitants of Isfahan, but he fears the Shirazis, who are a brave people, not to be controlled by kings, and he will not trust them with arms. This view of his relations with the 2 towns tallies with Abu Ishaq's subsequent history, and points to a considerable power of observation on the part of Ibn Battuta. But he relates a tale which would seem to show that Abu Ishaq was not unpopular even in Shiraz. On a certain occasion, he wished to build a great gate in that city, and hearing of his desire, the inhabitants vied with each other in their eagerness to satisfy it. Men of all ranks turned out to do the work, putting on their best clothes and digging the foundations with spades of silver. Abu Ishaq shared the passion of the age for letters, and was anxious to be accounted a rival to the king of Delhi in his generosity to men of learning. But, sighs Ibn Battuta, how far is the earth removed from the Pleiades? The Persian historian, who describes Abu Ishaq's execution, quotes a quatrain which the Atabeg is supposed to have written while he was in prison. Lay down thine arms when fortune is thy foe. 'Gainst heaven's wheel, wrestler, try not a throw. Drink steadfastly the cup whose name is death. Empty the dregs upon the earth and go. So perished the first patron of Hafiz. From 1353 to 1393, when Timur conquered Shiraz for the 2nd and last time, the great part of Persia was ruled by members of the house of Muzaffar. Scarcely a year passed undisturbed by civil war, scarcely a year in which one of the sons or grandsons of Muhammad did not suffer imprisonment or worse ills at the hands of his brothers. Muhammad himself was the first to fall. Shah Shuja seized his father while he was reading the Quran aloud with a poet of his court, and caused him to be blinded. A few years later, the grim life beat itself out against the prison walls of Kala-i-Safid. Without just cause, sings Hafiz, the victor of victors suffered imprisonment. Guiltless, the mightiest head was laid low. He had overcome Shiraz and Tabriz and Iraq. At the last, his own hour came. He who in the eyes of the world was the light he had kindled, i.e. Muhammad's son, Shah Shuja. Through those eyes which had gazed victorious upon the world thrust the hot iron. A stern and pitiless man was this Muhammad, brave in battle, wise in counsel, ardent in religion, but hard and cruel beyond measure. A perfidious friend and a relentless enemy. The Persian historian, Lutfullah, relates that on several occasions he had seen criminals brought before Muhammad while the Amir was engaged in reading the Quran. Laying the book aside, he would draw his sword and kill the offenders as they stood, and then return unmoved to his devotions. Shah Shuja once asked his father whether he had killed 1,000 men with his own hand. No, replied Muhammad, but I think that the number of them that I have slain must reach 800. After his death, Shah Shuja reigned in Shiraz, and his brother Shah Yahya in Yezd. Shah Shuja was a man of like energy with his father, but it was an energy directed in different channels. The stern religious ardour of the elder man was changed into a spirit of frenzied dissipation in the younger. Whenever he was not engaged in conducting expeditions against his brothers and nephews, he was taking part in the wildest orgies in Shiraz. He was scarcely less cruel than Muhammad. In a fit of drunkenness, he ordered one of his own sons to be blinded, and though, at the instance of his vizier, he repented and sent a second messenger, hot foot, after the first, it was already too late to save the boy. Before Shah Shuja's death, the knell of the house of Muzaffar had sounded. Tamburlaine and his Tartar hordes had advanced into northern Persia. In 1382, Shah Shuja sent a propitiatory embassy to him with gifts, jewels and silks, horses, a scarlet dye, a royal standard, and a Chinese umbrella, and Timur, in return, sent the king a robe of honour and a belt studded with jewels. Worn out before his time with riotous living, Shah Shuja did his utmost to secure the welfare of his family before he died. He sent letters both to Timur and to the Sultan Ahmed of Baghdad recommending to their protection his son Zayn el-Abidin, his brothers, and his nephews. The curtain is drawn aside for a moment from the deathbed of the king, and an anecdote, such as Oriental historians love, reveals to us the fearless and terrible face. Hearing that his brother Ahmed was preparing to dispute the succession with Zayn el-Abidin, he sent for him in order to persuade him to withdraw his claims. But when Ahmed entered the room where Shah Shuja lay sick to death, both brothers burst into tears, and Ahmed was so much overcome by emotion that he was obliged to withdraw. Thereupon Shah Shuja sent him a letter by the hand of faithful servant. "The world," he said, "is like unto the shadow of a cloud, and a dream of the night, for the one has no resting place, and when the dreamer awakens, there remains to him but a vain memory of the other. I foresee much disturbance in Shiraz. Kerman is the home of our fathers. I have no complaint to lay at your door, but now that I am about to fare upon a long journey, if you were to become a sower of discord, not I alone would reproach you, but God also, and our enemies would rejoice. Go therefore to Kerman and renounce this unhappy city." And Ahmed went. Shah Shuja died in the odour of sanctity. 10 holy men were with him continually, reading the Quran aloud from end to end each day. He left behind him a name renowned for courage and for liberality. He was a poet after the fashion of kings, and from boyhood he could repeat the Quran by heart. The son whose future he had spent his last hours in assuring was not to remain for long upon the throne, bequeathed to him by his father. During his short reign, Zayn el-Abidin was engaged in defending himself from the attacks of his cousin Mansur, but in 1388 he was obliged to flee before an enemy more terrible than any he had yet known. Timur, who for several years had been hovering upon the borders of Fars, overran southern Persia and took Shiraz. Zayn el-Abidin sought refuge with Mansur, who repaid his confidence by imprisoning and blinding him. It must have been in the year 1388 that the celebrated interview between Hafiz and Timur took place. See note to Poem 5. And not at the time of the second conquest of Shiraz in 1393. The confusion between the two dates has led several writers to doubt the truth of the story, since it is almost certain that the poet had died before 1393. Timur bestowed Shiraz upon Shah Yahya, uncle to Mansur and sometime governor of Yezd. But no sooner was the Tartar army called away by disturbances in the northern parts of the empire than Mansur overthrew his uncle and possessed himself of Shiraz. Hafiz did not live to see the end of the drama, but the end was not far off. In 1393, Timur advanced with 30,000 picked men against Mansur. The Muzaffaride, with only 3,000 or 4,000 men, twice charged into the heart of the Tartar force, and at one moment Timur's own life was in danger. Mansur, who was himself fighting in the thickest of the battle, sent a message back to the wings of his army, ordering them to support his desperate charge, but they did not obey his command. he fell fighting beneath the sword of Shah Rukh's Mizar, Timur's son, leaving the conqueror to march in triumph through Persepolis. Courage was a quality in which the descendants of Muhammad ibn Muzaffar were not deficient. But among a race of soldiers, Mansur seems to have been distinguished for his reckless bearing. He too, like the other members of his family, was a patron of learning, and it is related that he used to distribute 200 tomans daily among the poor scholars of Shiraz, both on account of their popularity and of their bravery. Timur saw that there would be no peace for him in Shiraz while one member of the house of Muzaffar remained alive. Mansur's survivors were put to the sword. Through all these changes of fortune, Hafiz appears to have played the prudent, if rather unromantic part of the Vicar of Bray. The slender thread of his personal history is made up for the most part of more or less mythical anecdote. He was the son, according to one tradition, of a baker of Shiraz, in which city he was probably educated. The poet Jami says that he does not know under what Sufi doctor Hafiz studied. As a young man, however, he was one of the followers of Sheikh Mahmud Attar, who would seem to have been somewhat of a freelance among the learned men of Shiraz. Sheikh Mahmud did not give himself up completely to the contemplative life, but combined the functions of a teacher with those of a dealer in fruit and vegetables. "O disciple of the tavern," sings Hafiz, "give me the precious goblet that I may drink to the sheikh who has no monastery." Sheikh Mahmud's attitude doubtless brought him under the condemnation of the stricter Sufis, of the disciples of a certain Sheikh Hassan Azraqapush in particular, who, as the title of their master denotes, clad themselves only in blue garments, and declared that their minds were filled with heavenly desires, just as their bodies were clothed in the colour of heaven. Hafiz falls foul of this rival school in several of his poems. "I am the servant," he says, "of all who scatter the dregs of the cup and are clothed in one colour, that is, clothed in sincerity, but not of them whose bodies are clad in blue, while black is the colour of their heart." And again, "Give me not the cup until I have torn from my breast the blue robe," by which he means that he cannot receive the teachings of true wisdom until he has divested himself of the errors of the uninitiated. From Sheikh Mahmud, perhaps, he learnt a wholesome philosophy which enabled him to see through the narrow-minded asceticism of other religious teachers, whether Sufi or orthodox, and he was not unmindful of the debt he owed him. "My grey beard," he sings, "who scatters the dregs of the wine, has neither gold nor power, but God has made him both munificent and merciful." And indeed, if he succeeded in unchaining the spirit of his disciple from the useless prejudice, it may be admitted that the sheikh went far towards providing him with a good equipment for life. Although he never submitted to any strict monastic rule, Hafiz assumed the dervish habit of which he speaks so contemptuously. We must suppose that he took the precaution, which he himself recommends, of washing it clean in the wine that the Sheikh Mahmud provided for him. In other words, that he tempered his orthodoxy with the freer doctrines he had derived from his teacher. He also became a sheikh. How he first revealed his inimitable gift of song is not known. There is a tradition that upon a certain day one of his uncles was engaged in composing a poem upon Sufism, and being but a mediocre poetaster, could get no further than the first line. Hafiz took up the sheet in his uncle's absence and completed the verse. The uncle was not a little annoyed. He bade Hafiz finish the poem, and at the same time cursed him and his works. "They shall bring insanity," he declared, "upon all that read them." Men say that the curse still hangs over the divan. Therefore, let no one whose reason is not strongly seated venture to study the poet. Whatever were his beginnings, it was not long before the young man rose into high repute. Abu Ishaq was his first patron. "By the favour of the victorious standards of a king," says Hafiz, "I was uplifted like a banner among the makers of verse." There is a long poem addressed to Abu Ishaq, in which he is called the king under whose feet the garden of his kingdom bursts into flower. "O great and holy," cries the poet, "every man who is a servant of thine in the is garden uplifted so high that the stars of Gemini are but as his girdle." Hafiz must have been in Shiraz when Abu Ishaq was brought thither, a prisoner from Isfahan. He may even have witnessed his execution outside Persepolis. "Fate overtook him," he sighs, "all too speedily, alas, for the violence and oppression in this world of pitfalls. Alas for the grace and the mercy that dwelt among us! Hast thou not heard, O Hafiz, the laughing of the struggling partridge? Little considered be the clutching talons of the falcon of death. From the protection of Abu Ishaq, Hafiz passed into that of Shah Shuja. But the relations between the two men seem to have been somewhat strained. Shah Shuja may have distrusted the loyalty of one to whom Abu Ishaq had been so good a patron. Moreover, he nursed a professional jealousy of Hafiz, being himself a writer of occasional verse. The historian Condamir tells of an interview which cannot have increased the goodwill of either interlocutor towards the other. Shah Shuja reproached Hafiz with the discursiveness of his songs. In one and the same, he said, you write of wine, of Sufism, and of the object of your affections. Now this is contrary to the practice of the eloquent. That which your majesty has deigned to speak, replied Hafiz, laying his tongue in his cheek, though Condamir does not mention the fact, is the essence of the truth, yet the poems of Hafiz enjoy a wide celebrity, whereas those of some other writers have not passed beyond the gates of Shiraz. But an occasional bandying of sharp speeches in which the king usually came off second best did little harm to a friendship which was based upon a marked correspondence in tastes. Since the hour, declares Hafiz, that the wine-cup received honour from Shah Shuja, fortune has put the goblet of joy into the hand of all wine-drinkers. And in several poems he welcomes Shah Shuja's accession to the throne and the consequent removal of an edict against the drinking of wine. The daughter of the grape has repented for her retirement. She went to the keeper of the peace, i.e. Shah Shuja, and received permission for her deeds. Forth came she from behind the curtain that she might tell her lovers that she has turned about. Partly out of gratitude, partly with an eye to future favours, Hafiz proclaimed the glory of Shah Shuja, just as he had proclaimed that all of the hapless Abu Ishaq, and the king was not averse from such good wishes as these from the most famous poet of the age. May the ball of the heavens be forever in the crook of thy polo stick, and the whole world be a playing ground unto thee. The fame of thy goodness has conquered the 4 quarters of the earth. May it be for all time a guardian unto thee. One of Shah Shuja's viziers, Haji Kawadmeddin Hassan, was also a good friend to Hafiz. In the poems he is frequently alluded to as the second Asaf, the first Asaf having been King Solomon's vizier, renowned for his wisdom, while Shah Shuja masquerades under the title of Solomon himself. On his return from a journey, probably to Yezd, Hafiz spent some months in the house of the vizier, inducted thereto by a cognate argument. In one of the poems there is a dialogue between himself and a friend, in which the friend says to him, "When after 2 years' absence thy destiny has brought thee home, why comest thou not out of thy master's house?" Hafiz replies that the road in which he walks is not of his choosing. "An officer of my judge stands like a serpent, in ambush upon the path, and whenever I would pass beyond my master's threshold, he serves me with a summons and hurries me back into my prison." He goes on to remark that under these painful circumstances he finds his master's house a sure refuge, and the servants of the vizier useful allies against the officers of the law. "If anyone proffers a demand to me there, I call to my aid the strong arm of one of the vizier's dependents, and with a blow I cause his skull to be cleft in two." A summary manner, one would think, of dealing with the law, and little calculated to incline the heart of his judge towards offender. There is another Kawadmeddin, who is frequently mentioned, the vizier of Sultan Uwais of Baghdad. He founded in Shiraz a college for Hafiz, in which the poet gave lectures on the Koran, and read out his own verses, and whither his fame drew a great number of pupils. We find Hafiz asking his benefactor for money to support this school in the following terms: "O discreet friend, my poem, in some retired spot to which even the wind is a stranger, come to the ear of the master, and between jest and earnest place the pointed saying, that his heart may consent unto it. Then, of thy kindness, pray his munificence to tell me. If I were to ask for a small stipend, would my request be tolerated?" One cannot but hope that so charming a begging letter, couched in verse withal, was more than tolerated. It was probably this vizier who sent a robe of honour to Hafiz, which, when it came, proved to be too short for him. But, says the poet politely, no favour of thine could be too short for any man. From Uwais himself, Hafiz is said to have received kindness, but he does not seem to have been satisfied with the Sultan's conduct towards him. "From my heart," he says, "I am the slave of Sultan Owais, but he remembers not his servant. The son of Owais, Sultan Ahmed of Baghdad, whose cruelty caused his subjects to call in the aid of Timur against him, was very anxious to induce Hafiz to visit his court. But Hafiz, perhaps with prudence, declined the invitation, saying that he was content with dry bread eaten at home, and had no desire to taste the honey that pilgrims gather by the roadside. He sent to Ahmed a poem in which he loaded his name with extravagant praise. On Persian soil, he declared, the bud of joy has never blown for me. How excellent is the tigress of Baghdad and the perfumed wine! O wind of the dawn, bring unto me the dust from my friend's threshold, that Hafiz may wash bright with it the eyes of his heart. Once only did he comply with the invitations of foreign kings, and his experience on that occasion was far from encouraging. He visited Shah Yahya, Shah Shuja's brother, at Yezd, but the reward which he received was not commensurate with his expectations. Long life to thee, and thy heart's desire, O cupbearer of Jem's court, he writes, and the context shows that the allusion is to Shah Yahya. Though while I dwelt with thee my cup was never filled with wine. Moreover, a devoted lover of Shiraz, Hafiz was overcome with homesickness when he was absent from his native town. Why, he says in a pathetic little poem written while he was at Yezd, why should I not return to mine own home? Why should I not lay my dust in the secret of mine own beloved? My bosom cannot endure the sorrows of exile. Let me return to mine own city, let me be master of my heart's desire. It was after this luckless visit to Shah Yahya that he is said to have remarked, it seems that fortune did not intend kings to be wise. He never again gathered the honey of the roads of pilgrimage. Once, indeed, in answer to the pressing invitation of Shah Mahmud Parabi, Sultan of Bengal, he set forth for India, but a series of accidents befell him. He lost heart and returned home again. The story is told in Note to Poem 21. From the Sultan of Hormuz he received many favours, though he refused to visit him and his pearl fisheries in the Persian Gulf. He compares this Sultan with Shah Yahya, much to the disadvantage of the latter, saying that the king who had never seen him had filled his mouth with pearls, whereas Shah Yahya, to whose court he had journeyed, had sent him empty away. Shah Shuja was not the only member of the house of Muzaffar who protected Hafiz. The warrior Prince Mansur was his staunch friend. He appears to have been absent from Shiraz at the time of Mansur's accession. Perhaps he had accompanied Imur's retreating army. The wind has brought me word, he cries, that the day of sorrow is overpast. I will return to Shiraz through the favour of my friend. On the banners of the conqueror, i.e. Mansur, of whose name this is the meaning, Hafiz is borne up into heaven. Fleeing for refuge, his destiny has set him upon the steps of a throne. Mansur held the poet in high esteem. There is a tradition that when he appointed one of his sons governor over a province, the young man asked his father to give him his vizier, Jalaluddin, as a counsellor, and Hafiz as a teacher. What? Replied Mansur. Wouldst thou be king even in thy father's lifetime, that thou demandest of him the two wisest men in his realm? Hafiz by this time had grown old. Youth had been very pleasant. Not without a sigh, the grey-haired man relinquished it. Ah, why has my black hair turned white? He laments, and tries to warm his old blood with the wine of former days. Yesterday at dawn, I came upon 1 or 2 glasses of wine as sweet as the lip of the cupbearer they seemed to my palate. And then, my brain afire, I desired to return to my mistress, youth, but between us a divorce had been pronounced. And again, last night Hafiz strayed into the tavern, and it seemed to him that youth, his mistress, had come back, and that love and madness had returned to his old head. Gib mein Jugend mir zurück. Other poets, besides Hafiz, have sung to the same tune. Whether or not he lived to witness the overthrow of the race that had sheltered him, he foresaw the troubles that were coming upon it, and upon his beloved Shiraz. There is a short poem full of foreboding, which is said to have been written after the entry of Timur. What tumult I see beneath the moon's orbit! Every quarter of the earth is full of evil and wickedness. There is strife among our daughters, and among our mothers contention, and the father is evilly disposed towards his son. Only the foolish are drinking sherbet of rose water and sugar. The wise are nourished upon their own heart's blood. The Arabian horse is wounded beneath the saddle, and the ass wears a collar of gold about his neck. Master, take the counsel of Hafiz. Go and do good, for I see that this maxim is worth more than a treasure house of jewels. In several verses he congratulates Mansur upon a victory and a fortunate return to Shiraz, which may perhaps refer to the re-establishment of the Muzaffarid line after Timur's departure. "Give me the cup," he says in one of these, "for the airs of youth blow through my old head. So glad am I to see the king's face again." The date of his death is variously given as 1388, 1389, 1391, and 1394, but it seems unlikely that he should have been alive as late as 1394. 1389 is the year given a couplet by an unknown author, which is inscribed upon his tomb. "If thou wouldst know when he sought a home in the dust of Musalla, seek his date in the dust of Musalla." The letters of the Persian words Kaki Musalla, dust of Musalla, give the number 791, that is 1389 of our era. He lies in the garden of Musalla outside Shiraz, a garden the praises of which he has never tired of singing, and on the banks of the Ruknabad, where he had so often rested under the shade of the cypress trees. When some 60 years after the poet's death, Sultan Baber conquered Shiraz, he erected a monument over the tomb of Hafiz. An oblong block of stone, on which was carved 2 songs from the divan, marks the grave. At the head of it is inscribed a sentence in Arabic: "God is the enduring, and all else passes away." The garden contains the tombs of many devout Persians who have desired to rest in the sacred earth which holds the bones of the poet, and his prophecy that his grave should become a place of pilgrimage for all the drunkards of the world has been to a great extent fulfilled. A very ancient cypress, said to be of Hafiz's own planting, stood for many hundreds of years at the head of his grave, and it cast its shadow over the dust of his desire. It is not often that a teacher and the favourite of princes enjoys unmixed popularity, especially when his criticisms of such as disagree with him are as harsh as often repeated as are those of Hafiz, nor does he seem to have been an exception to the general rule. Moreover, his own conduct gave his enemies sufficient grounds for complaint. His biographers, as biographers will, take a rosy view of his life. Dulat Shah, for instance, states that he turned always to the company of dervishes and of wise men, and sometimes he attained also to the society of princes. A friend of persons of eminent virtue and perfection, and of noble youths. But such accounts as these are not entirely borne out by other traditions, and his poems do not seem, to the unbiased reader, to be the works of a man of ascetic temperament. With all due deference to Dalu Shah, I would submit that Abu Ishaq, Shah Shuja, and Shah Mansur were none of them persons of eminent virtue. Indeed, it is difficult to imagine that a friend and a panegyrist of theirs could have renounced all the joys of life. His enemies went so far as to accuse him of heresy and even of atheism, and so strong was popular feeling against him that, on his death, it was debated whether his body might be given the rites of burial. The question was only settled by consulting his poems, which, on being taken at haphazard, opened upon the following verse: "Fear not to follow with pious feet the corpse of Hafiz, for though he was drowned in the ocean of sin, he may find a place in paradise." It is a fortunate age which will allow a man's writings to stand his doubtful reputation in such good stead. Hafiz was married, and he had a son. He laments the death of both wife and child in 2 poems, which are translated in this volume. In spite of all the favours which he received from the great men of his day, he is said to have died poor. During his lifetime he was too busy teaching and composing philosophical treatises, says his great Turkish editor Sudi. To gather together his songs, he used to recite them in his school, expressing a wish that these pearls might be strung together for the adornment of his contemporaries. This was done after his death by his pupil Said Qasim el-Anwar and the Divan of Hafiz, in one of the most popular books in the Persian language. From India to Constantinople, his songs are sung and repeated by all who speak the Persian tongue, and the number of his European translators shows that his uncle's curse has a special and peculiar influence in Western countries. Like the Aeneid, the Divan of Hafiz is consulted as a guide to future actions. There are several stories of famous men who have had recourse to these sorties Hafizene. It is related that Nadir Shah took counsel from Hafiz's books when he was meditating an expedition against Taurus, and opened it at the following verse. Iraq and Fars thou hast conquered with thy songs, O Hafiz. Now it is the turn of Baghdad and the appointed hour of Tabriz. Nadir Shah took this as an encouragement to fresh conquest, and went on his way rejoicing. It is not only as a maker of exquisite verse, but also as a philosopher that Hafiz has gained so wide an esteem in the East. No European who reads his divan but will be taken captive by the delicious music of his songs, the delicate rhythms, the beat of the refrain, and the charming imagery. Some of them are instinct with the very spirit of youth and love and joy. Some have a nobler humanity and cry out across the ages with a voice pitifully like our own. And yet few of us will turn to Hafiz for wisdom and comfort, or choose him as a guide. It is interminable that the hopeless mysticism, the playing with words that say one thing and mean something totally different, the vagueness of a philosophy that dares not speak out, which repels the European just as much as it attracts the Oriental mind. Give us a working theory, we demand. Build us imaginary mansions where our souls, fugitives from the actual, may dream themselves away. That, it seems to me, is what the Persian asks of his teacher. Hafiz belonged to the great sect from which so many of the most famous among Persian writers have sprung. Like Saadi and Yami and Jalaluddin Rumi and a score of others, he was a Sufi. The history of Sufism has yet to be written. The sources from which it has arose are uncertain, and that it should have found a home in Mohammedanism. The least mystical of all religions is still unexplained. Some have supposed that Sufism was imported from India after the time of Muhammad, some that it was a development of the doctrines of Zoroaster, which the Prophet's successors silenced but did not destroy. In reply to the first theory, it has been objected that there is no historic proof of the relations between India and Mohammedan countries after the Mohammedan era and before the rise of Sufism, by which the doctrines of the Indian mystics could have been propagated. And as for the second, it seems improbable that Sufism, of which the essential doctrine is unity, could have borrowed much from a religion as sharply opposed to it as that of the Zoroaster, whose creed is founded upon a dualism. A third theory is that the origins of Sufism are to be looked for in the philosophy of the Greeks, strangely distorted by the Eastern mind, and in the influence of Christianity. But though the works of Plato are frequently quoted by mystical writers, and though it seems certain that they owe something both to the Neoplatonic school of Alexandria and to the Christian religion, this would not be enough to account for the great perversion of Muhammad's teachings. Baron Sylvester de Sarcy suggested the following explanation of the matter. The 2nd century of the Hejira was a time of fermentation and of the rise of sects. This was due in the first place to the introduction of Greek philosophy, and in the second to the rivalry between the partisans of Ali and those of the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphs. It was among the followers of Ali that the doctrines of the union of God and man, the infusion of the divinity in the imams, and the allegorical interpretation of religious ceremonies grew up. Daulat Shah, in his biography of the Persian poets, traces back mysticism as far as to Ali himself, though it is probable that he is imputing to the son-in-law of the Prophet beliefs which were of somewhat later date. By force of circumstances, the Alids were placed in opposition to the ruling caliphs, and were obliged to find a justification for their attitude, and for submitting to the observances enjoined by those whom they refused to recognize as true representatives of Muhammad. They read the Quran by the light of a new creed, and interpreted it in a manner far different from that intended by its author. From the moment when the division between Shiite and Sunni sprang into being, the Shiites, or followers of Ali, made the eastern provinces of the Caliphate their stronghold. It is not unreasonable to suppose that a mysticism, in every way contrary to the true spirit of the Quran, made in those provinces nearest to India so rapid a progress, because, before the conquest of Persia by the Arabs, Indian mysticism had already struck root there. That is to say, that there had grown up, side by side with Zoroastrianism, a mysticism eminently congenial to the peculiar temper of the Persian mind. So congenial, indeed, that it was not stamped out by the Arab conquerors, but insinuated itself into the stern and practical creed which they forced upon a nation of dreamers and metaphysicians. The author of the Dabistan, a book written in the 17th century containing the description of 12 different faiths, relates that there existed in Persia a sect belonging to the Yenkane Bina, of those whose eyes are fixed upon one alone. They say that the world has no external or tangible existence. All that is God, and beyond him there is nothing. The intelligences and the souls of men, the angels, the heavens, the stars, the elements, and the three kingdoms of nature exist only in the mind of God, and have no existence beyond. If this is Indian doctrine of Maya, or illusion, adds M. D. Sarsi, had been transferred to Persia, there is every reason to believe that mysticism, grounded on the doctrine that all things are emanations from God, and that unto him they shall return, may be traced to the same source. The keynote of Sufism is the union, the identification of God and man. It is a doctrine which lies at the root of all spiritual religions, but pushed too far it leads to pantheism, quietism, and eventually to nihilism. The highest good to which the Sufis can attain is the annihilation of the actual, to forget that they have a separate existence, and to lose themselves in the divinity as a drop of water is lost in the ocean. In order to obtain this end, they recommend ascetic living and solitude, but they do not carry asceticism to the absurd extremes enjoyed by the Indian mystics, nor do they approve of artificial aids for the subduing of consciousness, such as opium or hashish, or the wild physical exertions of the dancing dervishes. The drunkenness of the Sufi poets, say their interpreters, is nothing but an ecstatic frame of mind in which the spirit is intoxicated with the contemplation of God, just as the body is intoxicated with wine. According to the Dabistan, there are 4 stages in the manifestation of the divinity. In the first, the mystic sees God in the form of a corporal being. In the second, he sees him in the form of one of his attributes of action, as the maker or the preserver of the world. In the third, he appears in the form of an attribute which exists in his very essence, as knowledge or life. In the fourth, the mystic is no longer conscious of his own existence. To the last, he can hope to attain but seldom. This losing of the soul in God is only a return, and here we come near to such Platonic doctrines as those embodied in the Phaedrus, to the conditions which existed before birth into the world. Just as in the dialogue the immortal steed which is harnessed to the chariot of the soul longs to return to the plane of birth, and to see again the true justice, beauty, and wisdom of which it has retained an imperfect recollection, so the soul of the Sufi longs to return to God, from whom it has been separated by the mortal veil of the body. But this reunion is pushed much further by the Eastern philosophers than by Plato. It implies, according to them, the complete annihilation of distinct personality, corresponding to the conditions quite unlike those described by the Platonic Socrates, which they believe to have existed before birth. There is nothing which is not from God and a part of God. In himself he contains both being and not being. When he chooses, he casts his reflection upon the void, and that reflection is the universe. There is a fine passage in Jami Yusuf and Zulika in which he sets forth this doctrine of the creation. Thou art but the glass, the poet concludes. His is the face reflected in the mirror. Nay, if thou lookest steadfastly, thou shalt see that he is the mirror also. In a parable, Jami illustrates the universal presence of God, and the blind searching of man for that by which he is surrounded on every side. There was a frog which sat upon the shores of the ocean, and ceaselessly, day and night, he sang its praise. As far as mine eyes can see, he said, I behold nothing but thy boundless surface. Some fish, swimming in the shallow water, heard the frog's song, and were filled with a desire to find that wonderful ocean of which he spoke. But go where they would, they could not discover it. At last, in the course of their search, they fell into a fisherman's net, and as soon as they were drawn out of the water, they saw beneath them the ocean for which they had been seeking. With a leap, they returned into it. The story of the creation as told in the Quran, it is possible for the Sufis to accept. They are bound to give an outward adhesion to it, but in their hearts they treat it as an allegory. The Word is posterior to God only in the nature of its existence, and not in time. The Sufis were not far from the doctrine of the eternity of matter, from which they were only withheld by the necessity of conforming with the teaching of the Quran. They content themselves with saying that the world came into existence when it pleased God to manifest himself beyond himself, and will cease when it shall please him to return it to himself again. It is more difficult to dispose of the resurrection of the body, which is constantly insisted upon by Muhammad. That the soul, when it has at last attained to complete union with God, should be obliged to return to the prison from whence it has escaped at death, is entirely repugnant to all Sufis, nor can they explain satisfactorily the divergence of their opinions from those of the Prophet. It has been well said that all religious teachers who have honestly tried to construct a working formula have found that one of their greatest difficulties lay in reconciling the all-powerfulness of God with man's consciousness of his will being free. For on the one hand, it is impossible to conceive a God worth the name who shall be less than omnipotent and omniscient, and on the other, it is essential to lay upon man some responsibility for his actions. Muhammad, more especially, as Count Gobineau points out in his excellent little book, found himself confronted with this difficulty, since his primary object was to exalt the divine personality, and to lift it out of the pantheism into which it had fallen among the pre-Islamic Arabs. But if he did not succeed in indicating a satisfactory way out of the dilemma, it is at least unjust to accuse him of having failed to recognize it. He insisted that man is responsible for his own salvation. Whosoever chooseth the life to come, their desire shall be acceptable unto God. There is a tradition that when some of his disciples were disputing over predestination, he said to them, "Why do you not imitate Omar? For when one came to him and asked him, 'What is predestination?' he answered, 'It is a deep sea.' And a second time he replied, 'It is a dark road.' And a third time, 'It is a secret which I will not declare, since God has seen fit to conceal it.' The Sufis were obliged to abandon free will. It was impossible to attach any responsibility to the reflection in the mirror. But here again, they did not venture to give expression to their real opinions, and their statements are therefore both confused and contradictory. A man may say, remarks the author of Dabistan, that his actions are his own, and with equal truth that they are God's. In the Gulshen-i-Raz, a poem written in the year 1317, and therefore contemporary with Hafiz, it is distinctly laid down that God will take men's actions into account. After that moment, i.e. the day of judgment, he will question them concerning good and evil. But such expressions as these are in direct opposition to the rest of the Sufi teaching. There is neither good nor evil, since both alike flow from God, from whom all flows. Some go so far as to prefer Pharaoh to Moses, Nimrod to Abraham, because they say that though Pharaoh and Nimrod were in apparent revolt against the divinity, in reality they knew their own nothingness and accepted the part that the divine wisdom had imposed upon them. There is neither reward nor punishment. Paradise is the beauty, hell the glory of God, and when it is said that those in hell are wretched, it is meant that the dwellers in heaven would be wretched in their place. And finally, there is no distinction between God and man. The soul is but an emanation from God, and a man is therefore justified in saying with the fanatic Hallaj, "I am God." Though Hallaj paid with his life for venturing to give voice to his opinion, he was only repeating aloud what all Sufis believe to be true. Is it permitted to a tree to say, "I am God," writes the author of the Gulshen-i-Raz? The allusion is to the burning bush that spoke to Moses. Why, then, may not a man say it? And again, in God there is no distinction of quality. In his divine majesty, I, thou, and we shall not be found. I, thou, we, and he bear the same meaning. For in unity there is no division. Every man who has annihilated the body and is entirely separated from himself hears within his heart a voice that crieth, "I am God." The conception of the union and interdependence of all things divine and human is far older than Sufi thought. It goes back to the earliest Indian teaching, and Professor Deussen, in his book on metaphysics, has pointed out the conclusion which is drawn from it in the Veda. The Gospels, he says, fix quite correctly as the highest law of morality. Love thy neighbour as thyself. But why should I do so, since by the order of nature I feel pain and pleasure only in myself, not in my neighbour? The answer is not in the Bible, this venerable book being not yet quite free from Semitic realism, but it is in the Veda. You shall love your neighbour as yourselves because you are your neighbour, and mere illusion makes you believe that your neighbour is something different from yourselves. Or in the words of the Bhagavad Gita, he who knows himself in everything and everything in himself will not endure himself by himself. This is the sum and tenor of all morality, and this is the standpoint of a man knowing himself a Brahmin. The Sufis were forced to pay an exaggerated deference to the Prophet and to Ali in order to keep on good terms with the Orthodox, but since they believed God to be the source of all creeds, they could not reasonably place one above another. Nay more, since they taught that any man who practiced a particular religion had failed to free himself from duality and to reach perfect union with God, they must have held Mohammedanism in like contempt with all other faiths. When thou and I remain not, when man is completely united with God, what matters the Kaaba and the synagogue and the monastery? That is, what difference is there between the religion of Mohammedan, Jew, and Christian? One night, says Faradeddin, however willing we may be to submit to the wise men of the East, when they tell us that the revelry of the poems is always a spiritual exaltation, it must be admitted that the words of the poet carry a different conviction to Western ears. There is undoubtedly a note of sincerity in his praise of love and wine and boon companionship, and I am inclined to think that Hafiz was one of those who, like Omar Khayyam, were wont to throw the garment of repentance annually into the fire of spring. It must be remembered that the morality of his day was not that of our own, and that the manners of the East resemble but vaguely those of the West. And though as a religious teacher Hafiz would have been better advised if he had less frequently loosened the rein of his desires, I doubt whether his songs would have rung for us with the same passionate force. After all, poems of St. Francis of Assisi are not much read nowadays. Nevertheless, the reader misses a sense of restraint both in the matter and in the manner of the divan. Too many Persians, Hafiz occupies the place that is filled by Shakespeare in the minds of many Englishmen. It may be a national prejudice, but I cannot bring myself to believe that the mental food supplied by the Oriental is as good as the other. But, then, our appetites are not the same. The tendency in dealing with a mystical poet is to read into him so-called deeper meanings, even when the simple meaning is clear enough and sufficient in itself. Hafiz is one of those who has suffered from this process. It has removed him, in great measure, from the touch of human sympathies, which are, when all is said and done, a poet's true kingdom. Of a different age, a different race, and a different civilization from ours, there are yet snatches in his songs of that melody of human life which is everywhere the same. When he cries, "My beloved is gone, and I had not even bidden him farewell," his words are as poignant now as they were 5 centuries ago, and they could gain nothing from a mystical interpretation. As simple and as touching as his lament for his son. Alas, he found it easy to depart, but unto me he left the harder pilgrimage. And for his wife, then said my heart, I will rest me in this city, which is illumined by her presence. Already her feet were bent upon a longer journey, but my poor heart knew it not. Not Shakespeare himself has found a more passionate image for love than, "Open my grave when I am dead, and thou shalt see a cloud of smoke rising out of it. Then shalt thou know that the fire still burns in my dead heart, yea, it has yet set my very winding sheet alight." Or, if the scent of her hair were to blow across my dust, when I had been dead 100 years, my mouldering bones would rise and come dancing out of the tomb. And he knows of what he writes when he says, "I have estimated the influence of reason upon love, and found that it is like that of a raindrop upon the ocean, which makes one little mark upon the water's face and disappears." These are the utterances of a great poet, the imaginative interpreter of the heart of man. They are not of one age or of another, but for all time. Fitzgerald knew it when he declared that Hafiz rang true. Hafiz is the most Persian of the Persians, he says. He is the best representative of their character, whether his sake and wine be real or mystical. Their religion and philosophy is soon seen through, and always seems to me coo-cooed over like a borrowed thing, which people once having got do not know how to parade enough. To be sure their roses and nightingales are repeated often enough. But Hafiz and old Omar Khayyam ring like true metal. The criticism and the praise seem to me both just and delicate. To a certain extent, it may be said that the Sufism of Hafiz is partly due to the natural leaning of the Oriental poet towards a picturesque diction, for all poetry must, to satisfy Eastern readers, be couched in a veiled and enigmatic speech, and has partly been read into the divan by later ages. But this is not all. With Shah Shuja, I would accuse him of mixing up inextricably wine and love and Sufi teaching, and perhaps more besides. To some at least of the innumerable difficulties which assail every man who turns a thoughtful eye upon life and its conditions, Hafiz seems to have accepted the solution presented to him by Sufism. He understood and sympathized with the bold heresy of Hallaj. Though fools whom God hath not uplifted know not the meaning of him who said, I am God. Sometimes we find him enunciating one of the abstruser of the Sufi doctrines. How shall I say that existence is mine when I have no knowledge of myself, or how that I exist not when mine eyes are fixed upon him? A man, that is, can lay claim to no individual existence. All that he knows is that he is a part of the eternal existing. Or again, he declares that his words are metaphorical, and should receive the full Sufi interpretation, as in the following couplet. Boon companion, minstrel, and cupbearer, all these are but names for him. The image of water and clay, man, is an illusion upon the road of life. But he handles Sufism in a broad and noble manner, which links it on to the highest codes of morality accepted among the civilized races of mankind. For all eternity the perfume of love comes not to him who has not swept with his cheek the dust from the tavern threshold. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Hafiz is saying, in phraseology suited to the ears of those whom he addressed, if thou desire the jewelled cup of ruby wine, he continues, and it is of the hunger and thirst after wisdom that he speaks. Ah, many tears shall thine eyes thread upon thine eyelashes. He did not forget that the Sufi gold is not always without alloy, and he was not one of those who believe that they have discovered the answer to all human demands when their own heart is satisfied. Since thou canst never leave this palace of thyself, he warns us, how canst thou hope to reach the village of truth? The song that filled his soul with gladness might strike on other ears to a different measure. And where is the music to which both the drunk and the sober can dance? He was indeed profoundly sceptical as to the infallibility of any creed, judging men not by the practice, but by the spirit that they lay beneath it. None shall die whose heart has lived with the life love breathed into it. But when the day of reckoning comes, I fancy that the sheik will find that he has gained as little by his abstinence as I by my feasting. Sufism apart, an undercurrent of mysticism runs through the poems, which it is impossible to explain away. If we should attempt to ignore it, many of the odes would have no meaning at all, and most of them would lose a good half of their interest. Take, for instance, such verses as the following. Heart and soul are fixed upon the desire of the beloved. This, at least, is, for if not, heart and soul are naught. Fate is that which comes to the brink without the heart's blood. If not, all thy striving after the garden of paradise is naught. Throw thyself not at the foot of its sacred trees, hoping for their shade. Dost thou not see, O cypress, that even these are naught unto thee? Hafiz is engaged in that terrible weighing of possibilities which every man who thinks must know. Surely the soul which is filled with the desire of God must have some quality which shall be stronger than death. But if this were not so, then indeed the soul itself is naught. Surely fate is like an empty bowl, standing upon the edge of the river of life. But if the bowl had been already filled with blood, then all your striving to reach the garden of paradise shall avail you nothing. For do you not see, you who dare to acknowledge the truth, that you cannot battle against an appointed destiny, and however grateful may be the shade of the holy trees, they could afford you no protection? Nor can I believe that it is an earthly love of whom he speaks when he says, since the beloved has veiled his face, how comes it that his lovers are reciting his beauties. They can only tell what they imagine to be there. We are all engaged in telling each other only what we imagine to be there. It is a curious coincidence, if it be nothing more, that at the time when mystical poetry was taking a recognized place in the literature of Persia and of India, it was also springing into existence in the West. The songs of the troubadours were avowedly intended to convey a meaning deeper than that which lay upon the surface. The romance of the rose comes nearer than any other Western allegory to a fully fledged mysticism worthy of an Oriental poet. St. Francis addresses his Redeemer in terms not very different from those used by Hafiz to express his longing after divine wisdom, and the Beatrice, perhaps of Vita Nuova, certainly of the Divine Comedy, is no less intangible than the allegorical mistress, when she is allegorical, of the Persian. Hafiz and Dante, it is interesting to note, were almost contemporaries. At the time when Dante was climbing Can Grande's veery stair, Hafiz was opening his eyes upon yet more tumultuous world. Both were driven by the confusion around them to look for some solid platform on which to build a theory of existence, but Dante found it in that strenuous personal faith which is forever impossible to minds of the temper of that of Hafiz. Moreover, the mysticism of Dante stands with its feet planted firmly upon the earth. Man and his deeds might be fleeting, but they laid so strong a hold upon the poet's imagination that he welded them into a stepping stone to that which shall not pass away. His own life was spent in a ceaseless political activity. For all his visionary journeys through heaven and hell, Dante lived as keenly as any of his contemporaries. The fire still burns in the dead heart. The fierce and tender spirit, roused by turns to merciless condemnation and exquisite pity, still glows with a flame removed from mortal conditions, which the chill of death cannot extinguish as long as men shall read and understand. Through him his age lives. The people whom he had met, those of whom he had only heard, the smallest incidents of his time, the sum of all that it knew and of all that he had believed, are struck out forever, hard and sharp, in his vivid lines, and the fortunes of Florence, of one little town in a little corner of the world, loom to us under the poet's influence, as big and as tragic as they seem to that most ardent of citizens. To Hafiz, on the contrary, modern instances have no value. Contemporary history is too small an episode to occupy his thoughts. During his lifetime, the city that he loved, perhaps as dearly as Dante loved Florence, was besieged and taken 5 or 6 times. It changed hands even more often. It was drenched with blood by one conqueror, filled with revelry by a second, and subjected to the hard rule of asceticism by a third. One after another, Hafiz saw kings and princes rise into power and vanish, like snow upon the desert's dusty face. Pitiful tragedies, great rejoicings, the fall of kingdoms and the clash of battle all, these he must have seen and heard. But what echo of them is there in his poems? Almost none. An occasional allusion which learned commentators refer to some political event, and exaggerated effusion in praise first of one king, then of another, the celebration of such and such a victory, and the prowess of such and such a royal general, just what any self-respecting court poet would feel it incumbent upon himself to write, and no more. But some of us will feel that the apparent indifference of Hafiz lends to his philosophy a quality which that of Dante does not possess. The Italian is bound down within the limits of his own realism. His theory of the universe is essentially of his own age, and what to him was so acutely real is to many of us merely a beautiful or terrible image. The picture that Hafiz drew represents a wider landscape, though the immediate foreground may not be so distinct. It is as if his mental eye, endowed with wonderful acuteness of vision, had penetrated into those provinces of thought which we of a latter age were destined to inhabit. We can forgive him for leaving us so indistinct a representation of his own time and of the life of the individual in it, when we find him formulating ideas as profound as the warning that there is no musician to whose music both the drunk and the sober can dance. Renan has put into a few luminous sentences his view of mystical poets of India and Persia. On sait que dans ces pays, he says, s'est développée une vaste littérature où l'amour divin et fameux terrestre se croissant d'une façon souvent difficile à démêler. L'origine de ces singuliers genres de poésie est une question qui n'est pas encore éclaircie. Dans beaucoup de cas, les sons mystiques prêtés et certains procès érotiques profonds et hindouistes n'ont pas plus de réalité que les allégories de cantiques désacantés. Pour Hafiz, par exemple, il semble bien que l'explication allégorique est le plus souvent un fruit de la fantaisie des commentateurs ou des précautions que les admirateurs de poété étaient obligés de prendre pour savoir l'orthodoxie de leur auteur favori. Puis l'imagination étant montée sur ces thèmes, et les esprits étant foussés par une exquisée que ne voulait voir partout que allégories, on est venu à faire des poèmes réellement à double sens. Comme ceux de Jalaluddin Rumi, de Wali and C. Dans l'Indie et les Perses, ce genre de poésie érotico-mystique est le fruit d'un extrême raffinement, d'une imagination vive et portée un quiétisme, d'un certain goût de mystère et aussi une presse de moins, de l'hypocrisy imposée par le fanatisme musulman. C'est, en effet, comme réaction contre la chercherie de l'islamisme que le soufisme est fait fortune chez les musulmans dans arabes. Il est fou voir une révolte de l'esprit arien contre l'effroyante simplicité de l'esprit sémitique, excluant par la rigueur de sa théologie toute dévotion particulière, toute doctrine secrète, toute combinaison religieuse vivant une variée. Those who have written poems, réellement et double sens, are careful to insist upon the mighty secrets that their words convey. The things which wise men, who are sometimes called drunkards and sometimes seers, says one of them, wish to express by the words wine, cup, and cupbearer, musician, magician, and Christian girdle, are so many profound mysteries, which sometimes they translate by an enigma and sometimes they reveal. The symbols used by each writer are more or less the same. There is an accepted Sufi code with which the initiated are acquainted. The nightingale, and none beside, knows the full worth of the rose, sings Hafiz. For many a one reads the leaf and understands not the meaning thereof, but though we may not be all nightingales, we have some guide to the interpretation of the leaf. Many of the words in the Sufi dictionary have been expounded to the outer world. The tavern, for instance, is the place of instruction or worship, of which the tavern keeper is the teacher or priest, and the wine, the spirit of divine knowledge, which is poured out for his disciples. The idol is God. Beauty is the divine perfection. Shining locks, the expansion of his glory. Down on the cheek denotes the cloud of spirits that encircles his throne, and a black mole is the point of indivisible unity. The catalogue might be continued to an extent. Almost every word has a vague and somewhat shifting significance in the language of mysticism, which he who has a mind for such exercises may decipher, if he choose. Hafiz is rather the forerunner than the founder of this school of poets. It is equally unsatisfactory to give a completely mystical or a completely material interpretation to his songs. He wrote of the world as he found it. In his experience, pleasure and religion were the two most important incentives to human action. He ignored neither one nor the other. I am very conscious that my appreciation of the poet is that of the Western. Exactly on what grounds he is appreciated in the East, it is difficult to determine, and what his compatriots make of his teaching, it is perhaps impossible to understand. From our point of view, then, the sum of his philosophy seems to be that though there is little of which we can be certain, that little must always be the object of all men's desire. Each of us will set out upon the search for it along a different road, and if none will find his road easy to follow, each may, if he be wise, discover compensations for his toil by the wayside. And for the rest, who knows the secret of the veil? Like many a good and brave man before his time and since, I think he was content to faintly trust the larger hope. 1. Arise, O cupbearer, rise, and bring to lips that are thirsting the bowl they praise, for it seemed that love was an easy thing, but my feet have fallen on difficult ways. I have prayed the wind o'er my heart to fling the fragrance of musk in her hair that sleeps. In the night, Of her hair, yet no fragrance stays, the tears of my heart's blood, my sad heart weeps. Hear the tavern keeper who counsels you, with wine, with red wine, your prayer carpet dye. There was never a traveller like him but knew the ways of the road and the hostelry. Where shall I rest, when the still night through, beyond thy gateway, O heart of my heart, the bells of the camels lament and cry, bind up thy burden again and depart. The waves run high, night is clouded with fears, and eddying whirlpools clash and roar. How shall my drowning voice strike their ears, whose light-freighted vessels have reached the shore? I sought mine own, the unsparing years have brought me mine own, a dishonoured name. What cloak shall cover my misery o'er, when each jesting mouth has rehearsed my shame? O Hafiz, seeking an end to strife, hold fast in thy mind what the wise have writ. If at last thou attain the desire of thy life, cast the world aside, yea, abandon it. 2. The bird of gardens sang unto the rose, new blown in the clear dawn, bow down thy head. As fair as thou within this garden close, many have bloomed and died. She laughed, and said, that I am born to fade grieves not my heart, but never was it a true lover's part, to vex with bitter words his love's repose. The tavern step shall be thy hostelry, for love's diviner breath comes but to those that suppliant on the dusty threshold lie. And thou, if thou wouldst drink the wine that flows from life's bejewelled goblet, ruby red, upon thine eyelashes thine eyes shall thread 1,000 tears for this temerity. Last night, when Irem's magic garden slept, stirring the hyacinth's purple tresses curled, the wind of morning through the alleys stepped. Where is thy cup, the mirror of the world? And where is love, thou throne of gem? I cried. The breezes knew not, but, alas, they sighed, that happiness should sleep so long, and wept. Not on the lips of men love's secret lies, remote and unrevealed his dwelling place. O Saki, come, the idle laughter dies, when thou the feast with heavenly wine dost grace. Patience and wisdom, Hafiz, in a sea of thine own tears are drowned. Thy misery they could not still nor hide from curious eyes. 3. Wind from the east, O lapwing of the day, I send thee to my lady through the way. Is far to Saba, where I bid thee fly, lest in the dust thy tameless wings should lie. Broken with grief, I send thee to thy nest, fidelity. Or, far or near there is no halting place, upon love's road absent I see thy face, and in thine car my wind-blown greetings sound. North winds and east waft them where they are bound. Each morn and eve convoys of greeting fair I send to thee. Unto mine eyes a stranger, thou that art, a comrade ever present to my heart. What whispered prayers and what full meed of praise I send to thee. Lest sorrow's army waste thy heart's domain, I send my life to bring thee peace again. Dear life, thy ransom from thy singers learn, how one that longs for thee may weep and burn. Sonnets and broken words, sweet notes and songs, I send to thee. Give me the cup, a voice rings in mine ears, crying, bear patiently the bitter years. For all thine ills I send thee heavenly grace, God the Creator mirrored in thy face. Thine eyes shall see God's image in the glass, I send to thee. Hafiz, thy praise alone my comrades sing. Hasten to us, thou that art sorrowing. A robe of honour and a harnessed steed I send to thee. 4. Sleep on thine eyes bright as narcissus flowers, falls not in vain, and not in vain thy hair's soft radiance showers. Ah, not in vain. Before the milk upon thy lips was dry, I said, Lips where the salt of wit doth lie, sweets shall be mingled with thy mockery, and not in vain. Thy mouth, the fountain where life's water flows, a dimpled well of tears is set below, and death lies near to life, thy lovers know, but know in vain. God send to thee great length of happy days, lo, not for his own life thy servant prays. Love's dart in thy bent brows the archer lays, nor shoots in vain. Art thou with grief afflicted, with the smart of absence, and is bitter toil thy part? Thy lamentations and thy tears, O heart, are not in vain. Last night the wind from out her village blew, and wandered all the garden alleys through. O rose, tearing thy bosom's robe in two, 'twas not in vain. And Hafiz, though thy heart within thee dies, hiding love's agony from curious eyes, ah, not in vain thy tears, not vain thy sighs, not all in vain. 5. O Turkish maid of Shiraz in thy hand, if thou'lt take my heart for the mole on thy cheek, I would barter Bokhara and Samarkand. Bring, cupbearer, all that is left of thy wine. In the garden of paradise vainly thou'lt seek the lip of the fountain of Ruknabad, and the bowers of Musalla where roses twine. They have filled the city with blood and broil, those soft-voiced lullis for whom we sigh. As Turkish robbers fall on the spoil, they have robbed and plundered the peace of my heart. Dowered is my mistress, a beggar am I. What shall I bring her? Beautiful face needs nor jewel nor mole, nor the tiring maid's art. Brave tales of singers and wine relate, the key to the hidden 'twere vain to seek. No wisdom of ours has unlocked that gate, and locked to our wisdom it still shall be. But of Joseph's beauty the lute shall speak, and the minstrel knows that Zuleika came forth, love parting the curtains of modesty. When thou spokest ill of thy servant 'twas well, God pardon thee, for thy words were sweet. Not unwelcomed the bitterest answer fell from lips where the ruby and sugar lay. But fair love, let good counsel direct thy feet. Far dearer to youth than dear life itself are the warnings of one grown wise and grey. The song is sung, and the pearl is strung. Come hither, O Hafiz, and sing again, and the listening heavens above thee hung shall loose o'er thy verse the Pleiades chain. 6. A flower-tinted cheek, the flowery close of the fair earth, these are not enough for me. Enough that in the meadow wanes and grows the shadow of a graceful cypress tree. I am no lover of hypocrisy. Of all the treasures that the earth can boast, a brimming cup of wine I prize the most. This is enough for me. To them that are here renowned for virtue live, a heavenly palace is the meet reward. To me the drunkard and the beggar give the temple of the grape with red wine stored. Beside a river seat, thee on the sward, it floweth past, so flows thy life away. So sweetly, swiftly, fleets our little day, swift, but enough for me. Look upon all the gold in the world's mart, on all the tears the world hath shed in vain. Shall thy not satisfy thy craving heart? I have enough of loss, enough of gain. I have my love, what more can I obtain? Mine is the joy of her companionship, whose healing lip is laid upon my lip. This is enough for me. I pray thee send not forth my naked soul from its poor house to seek for paradise. Though heaven and earth before me God unroll, back to thy village still my spirit flies, and Hafiz at the door of Kismet lies. No just complaint, a mind like water clear, a song that swells and dies upon the ear, these are enough for thee. 7. From the garden of heaven a western breeze blows through the leaves of my garden of earth. With a love like a hurry idle take mine ease, and wine, bring me wine, the giver of mirth. Today the beggar may boast him a king, his banqueting hall is the ripening field, and his tent the shadow that soft clouds fling. A tale of April the meadows unfold. Ah, foolish for future credit to slave, and to leave the cash of the present untold. Build a fort with wine where thy heart may brave the assault of the world when thy fortress falls. The relentless victor shall need from thy dust bricks that repair its crumbling walls. Trust not the word of that foe in the fight. Shall the lamp of the synagogue lend its flame to set thy monastic torches alight? Drunken am I, yet place not my name in the book of doom, nor pass judgment on it. Who knows what the secret finger of fate upon his own white forehead has writ? And when the spirit of Hafiz has fled, follow his bier with a tribute of sighs. Though the ocean of sin has closed o'er his head, he may find a place in God's paradise. 8. The rose has flushed red, the bud has burst, and drunk with joy is the nightingale. Hail, Sufis, lovers of wine, all hail! For wine is proclaimed to a world athirst. Like a rock your repentance seemed to you. Behold the marvel of what avail was your rock for a goblet cleft in two. Bring wine for the king and the slave at the gate. Alike for all is the banquet spread, and drunk and sober are warmed and fed. When the feast is done, and the night grows late, and the second door of the tavern gapes wide, the low and the mighty must bow the head. 'Neath the archway of life, to meet what? Outside? Except thy road through affliction pass, none may reach the halting station of mirth. God's treaty, am I not lord of the earth? Men sealed with a sigh, ah yes, alas! Nor with eyes nor eyes, not, let thy mind contend. Rest assured all perfection of mortal birth in the great is not, at the last shall end. For Asaf's pomp and the steeds of the wind and the speech of birds down the wind have fled, and he that was lord of them all is dead. Of his mastery nothing remains behind. Shoot not thy feathered arrow astray. A bow-shot length through the air it has sped, and then dropped down in the dusty way. But to thee, O Hafiz, to thee, O tongue that speaks through the mouth of the slender reed, what thanks to thee, when thy verses speed from lip to lip, and the song thou hast sung? 9. O cup-bearer, set my glass afire with the light of wine. O minstrel, sing, the world fulfilleth my heart's desire. Reflected within the goblet's ring, I see the glow of my love's red cheek, and scant of wit, ye who fail to seek the pleasures that wine alone can bring. Let not the blandishments be checked that slender beauties lavish on me, until in the grace of the cypress decked, my love shall come like a ruddy pine tree. He cannot perish whose heart doth hold the life-love breaths, though my days are told. In the book of the world lives my constancy. But when the day of reckoning is here, I fancy little will be the gain that accrues to the sheik for his lawful cheer, or to me for the draught forbidden I drain. The drunken eyes of my comrades shine, and I too, stretching my hand to the wine, on the neck of drunkenness loosen the rein. O wind, if thou passest the garden close, of my heart's dear master carry for me the message I send to him, wind that blows. Why hast thou thrust from thy memory my hapless name? Breathe low in his ear. Knowest thou not that the day is near, when nor thou nor any shall think on me? If with tears, O Hafiz, thine's eyes are wet, scatter them round thee like grain and snare, the bird of joy when it comes to thy net. As the tulip shrinks from the cold night air, so shrank my heart and quailed in the shade. O songbird fortune, the toils are laid. When shall thy bright wings lie pinioned there? The heaven's green sea, and the bark therein, the slender bark of the crescent moon, or lost in thy bounty's radiant noon, vizier and pilgrim, Kawa Medin. 10. Singer, Sweet singer, fresh notes strew, fresh and afresh, and new and new. Heart-gladdening wine thy lips imbrue, fresh and afresh, and new and new. Saki, thy radiant feet I hail, flush with red wine the goblets pale. Flush our pale cheeks to drunken hue, fresh and afresh, and new and new. Then with thy love to toy with thee, rest thee, rest, where none can see. Seek thy delight, for kisses sue, fresh and afresh, and new and new. Here round thy life the vine is twined, drink I, for elsewhere what wine wilt find? Drink to her name, to hours that flew, hours ever fresh, and new and new. She that has stolen my heart from me, how does she wield her empery? Paints and adorns and scents her too, fresh and afresh and new and new. Wind of the dawn that passest by, swift to the street of my fairy high, whisper the tale of Hafiz true, fresh and afresh, and new and new. Mirth, spring, to linger in a garden fair. What more has earth to give? All ye that wait, where is the cupbearer, the flagon where? When pleasant hours slip from the hand of fate, reckon each hour as a certain gain. Who seeks to know the end of mortal care shall question his experience in vain. Thy fettered life hangs on a single thread. Some comfort for thy present ills devise, but those that time may bring thou shalt not dread. Waters of life and Irim's paradise, what meaning do our dreams and pomp convey, save that beside a mighty stream, wide fed, we sit and sing of wine and go our way. The modest and the merry shall be seen to boast their kinship with a single voice. There are no differences to choose between. Thou art but flattering thy soul with choice. Who knows the curtain's secret? Heaven is mute, and yet with him who holds the curtain, e'en with him, O braggart, thou wouldst raise dispute. Although his thrall shall miss the road and err, 'tis but to teach him wisdom through distress, else pardon and compassionate mercy were but empty syllables and meaningless. The zealot thirsts for draughts of Kosar's wine, and Hafiz doth an earthly cup prefer, but what between the two is God's design? 12. Where is my ruined life, and where the fame of noble deeds? Look on my long-drawn road, and whence it came, and where it leads. Can drunkenness be linked to piety and good repute? Where is the preacher's holy monody? Where is the lute? From monkish cell and lying garb released, O heart of mine, where is the tavern fane, the tavern priest? Where is the wine? Past days of meeting, let the memory of you be sweet. Where are those glances fled, and where for me reproaches meet? His friend's bright face warms not the enemy when love is done. Where is the extinguished lamp that made night day? Where is the sun? Balm to mine eyes the dust, my head I bow upon thy stair. Where shall I go? Where from thy presence? Thou art everywhere. Look not upon the dimple of her chin, danger lurks there. Where wilt thou hide, O trembling heart, fleeing in such mad haste? Where? To steadfastness and patience, friend, ask not. If Hafiz keep patience and steadfastness, I have forgot. And where is sleep? 13. Lady, that hast my heart within thy hand, thou heedst me not, and if thou turn thine ear unto the wise, thou shalt not understand. Behold, the fault is thine, our words were clear. For all the tumult in my drunken brain, praise God, who trieth not his slave in vain. Nor this world, nor the next, shall make me fear. My weary heart eternal silence keeps. I know not who has slipped into my heart. Though I am silent, one within me weeps. My soul shall rend the painted veil apart. Where art thou, minstrel? Touch thy saddest strings, till clothed in music, such as sorrow sings, my mournful story for thy zither sweeps. Lo, not at any time I lent mine ear, to hearken to the glories of the earth, only thy beauty to mine eyes was dear. Sleep has forsaken me, and from the birth of night till day I weave bright dreams of thee. Drunk with 100 nights of revelry, where is the tavern that sets forth such cheer? My heart, sad hermit, stains the cloister floor with drops of blood, the sweat of anguish dire. Ah, wash me clean and o'er my body pour love's generous wine. The worshippers of fire have bowed them down and magnified my name, for in my heart there burns a living flame, transpiercing death's impenetrable door. What instrument through last night's silence rang? My life into his lay the minstrel wove, and filled my brain with the sweet song he sang. It was the proclamation of thy love that shook the strings of life's most secret lyre. And still my breast heaves with the last night's desire, for countless echoes from that music sprang. And ever, since the time that Hafiz heard his lady's voice, as from a rocky hill reverberates the softly spoken word, so echoes of desire his bosom fill. 14. The nightingale with drops of his heart's blood had nourished the red rose. Then came a wind, and catching at the boughs in envious mood, 100 thorns about his heart entwined. Like to the parrot crunching sugar, good seemed the world to me who could not stay the wind of death that swept my hopes away. Light of mine eyes and harvest of my heart, and mine at least in changeless memory. Ah, when he found it easy to depart, he left the harder pilgrimage to me. O camel driver, though the cordage start, for God's sake help me lift my fallen load, and pity be my comrade of the road. My face is seamed with dust, mine eyes are wet. Of dust and tears the turquoise firmament needeth the bricks for joy's abode, and yet, alas, and weeping, yet I make lament. Because the moon her jealous glances set upon the bow-bent eyebrows of my moon, he sought a lodging in the grave too soon. I had not castled, and the time is gone. What shall I play upon the checkered floor of night and day? Death won the game forlorn, and careless now, Hafiz can lose no more. 15. Return, that to a heart wounded full sore, valiance and strength may enter in. Return, and life shall pause at the deserted door, the cold dead body breathe again and burn. O come, and touch mine eyes of thy sweet grace, for I am blind to all but to thy face. Open the gates, and bid me see once more. Like to a cruel Ethiopian band, sorrow despoiled the kingdom of my heart. Return, glad lord of Rome, and free the land. Before thine arms the foe shall break in part. See now I hold a mirror to mine eyes, and naught but thy reflection therein lies. The glass speaks truth to them that understand. Night is with child. Hast thou not heard men say? Night is with child. What will she bring to birth? I sit and ask the stars when thou art away. O come, and when the nightingale of mirth pipes in the spring-awakened garden ground, in Hafiz's heart shall ring a sweeter sound. Diviner nightingales attune their lay. 16. What is wrought in the forge of the living in life? All things are naught. Ho, fill me the bowl, for naught is the gear of the world and the strife. One passion has quickened the heart and the soul. The beloved's presence alone they have sought. Love at least exists, yet if love were not, heart and soul would sink to the common lot. All things are naught. Like an empty cup is the fate of each, that each must fill from life's mighty flood. Naught thy toil, though to paradise's gate thou reach. If another has filled up thy cup with blood, neither shade from the sweet-fruited trees could be bought. By thy praying, O cypress of truth, dost not see that cedra and tuba were naught, and to thee all then were naught? The span of thy life is as 5 little days, brief hours and swift in this halting place. Rest softly, rest, while the shadow delays, for time's self is naught, and the dial's face. On the lip of oblivion we linger, and short is the way from the lip to the mouth where we pass. While the moment is thine, fill, O Saki, the glass, ere and all is naught. Consider the rose that breaks into flower, neither ripens though she fade and die. Powers of the world endure for an hour, but naught shall remain of their majesty. Be not too sure of your crown, you who thought that virtue was easy and recompense yours. From the monastery to the wine tavern's doors, the way is naught. What though I, too, have tasted the salt of my tears? Though I, too, have burnt in the fires of grief, shall I cry aloud to unheeding ears? Mourn and be silent, naught brings relief. Thou, Hafiz, art praised for the songs thou hast wrought, but bearing a stained or an honoured name, the lovers of wine shall make light of thy fame. All things are naught. 17. Lay not reproach at the drunkard's door, O fanatic, thou that art pure of soul, not thine on the page of life to enroll, the faults of others, or less or more. I have swerved from my path, keep thou to thine own, for every man when he reaches the goal shall reap the harvest his hands have sown. Leave me the hope of a former grace, till the curtain is lifted, none can tell, whether in heaven or deepest hell, fair or vile, shall appear his face. Alike the drunk and the strict of fare, for his mistress yearns. In the mosque love doth dwell, and the church for his lodging is everywhere. If without the house of devotion I stand, I am not the first to throw wide the door. My father opened it long before. The eternal paradise slipped from his hand. All you that misconstrue my words' intent, I lie on the bricks of the tavern floor, and a brick shall serve me for argument. Heaven's garden future treasures may yield. Make the most of earth's treasury. The flickering shade of the willow tree, and the grass-grown lip of the fruitful field. Trust not in deeds, the eternal day shall reveal the Creator's sentence on thee. But till then, what his finger has writ, who can say? Bring to the cup in thine hand, to the judgment seat. Thou shalt rise, O Hafiz, to heaven's gate, from the tavern where thou hast tarried late. And if thou hast worshipped wine, thou shalt meet the reward that the faithful attain. If such thy life, then fear not thy fate. Thou shalt not have lived and worshipped in vain. 18. Slaves of thy shining eyes are even those that diadems of might and empire bear. Drunk with the wine that from thy red lip flows, are they that e'en the grape's delight forswear. Drift, like the wind across a violet bed, before thy many lovers, weeping low, and clad like violets in blue robes of woe, who feel thy wind-blown hair, and bow the head. Thy messenger, the breath of dawn, and mine, a stream of tears, since lover and beloved keep not their secret, through my verses shine, though other lays my flower's grace have proved, and countless nightingales have sung thy praise. When veiled beneath thy curls thou passest, see, to right and leftward, those that welcome thee have bartered peace and rest on thee to gaze. But thou that knowest God by heart, away, wine-drunk, love-drunk, we inherit paradise. His mercy is for sinners, hence and pray, where wine thy cheek red as red Urquan dyes, and leave the cell to faces sinister. O Kazir, whose happy feet bathed in life's fount, help one who toils afoot the horsemen mount, and hasten on their way, I scarce can stir. Loose me not. Set not Hafiz free from out the bondage of thy gleaming hair. Safe only those safe and at liberty that fast enchained in thy linked ringlets are. But from the image of his dusky cheek, learn this from Hafiz: proudest heads shall bend, and dwellers on the threshold of a friend be crowned with the dust that crowns the meek. "19. What drunkenness is this that brings me hope? Who was the cupbearer, and whence the wine? That minstrel singing with the full voice divine, what lay was his? For amid the woven rope of song he brought word from my friend to me, set to his melody. The wind itself bore joy to Solomon. The lapwing flew from Sheba's garden close, bringing good tidings of its queen and rose. Take thou the cup, and go where meadows span the plain, whither the bird with tuneful throat has brought spring's sweeter note. Welcome, O rose, and full-blown eglantine. The violets their scented gladness fling, jasmine breathes purity art sorrowing. Like an unopened bud, O heart of mine, the wind of dawn that sets closed blossoms free brings its warm airs to thee. Saki, thy kiss shall still my bitter cry. Lift up your grief-bowed heads, all ye that weep. The healer brings joy's wine cup. O drink deep. Disciple of the tavern priest am I. The pious sheik may promise future bliss. He brings me where joy is. The greedy glances of a Tartar horde to me seemed kind. My foeman spared me not, though one poor robe was all that I had got. But heaven served Hafiz as a slave his lord, and when he fled through regions desolate, heaven brought him to thy gate. "20. From out the street of so-and-so, O wind, bring perfume sweet to me, for I am sick and pale with woe. O bring me rest from misery, the dust that lies before her door, love's long-desired elixir pour. Upon this wasted heart of mine, bring me a promise and a sign. Between the ambush of mine eyes and my heart's fort there's enmity. Her eyebrows bow the dart that flies. Beneath her lashes bring to me. Sorrow and absence glances cold before my time have made me old. A wine cup from the hand of youth bring me for pity and for ruth. Then shall all unbelievers taste a draught or two of that same wine. But if they like it not, O haste, and let joy's flowing cup be mine. Cupbearer, seize today, nor wait until tomorrow, or from fate some passport to felicity, some written surety bring to me. My heart threw back the veil of woe, consoled by Hafi's melody. From out the street of so-and-so, O wind, bring perfume sweet to me. 21. Not all the sum of earthly happiness is worth the bowed head of a moment's pain. And if I sell for wine my dervish dress, worth more than what I sell is what I gain. Land where my lady dwells, thou holdest me, enchained. Else fars, where but a barren soil, not worth the journey over land and sea, not worth the toil. Down in the quarter where they sell red wine, my holy carpet scarce would fetch a cup. How brave a pledge of piety is mine, which is not worth a goblet foaming up. Mine enemy heaped scorn on me, and said, Forth from the tavern gate! Why am I thrust from off the threshold? Is my fallen head not worth the dust? Wash white that travel-stained sad robe of thine, where word and deed alike one colour bear. The grape's fair purple garment shall outshine thy many-coloured rags and tattered gear. Full easy seemed the sorrow of the sea, lightened by hope of gain. Hope flew too fast, 100 pearls were poor indemnity, not worth the blast. The Sultan's crown with priceless jewels set encircles fear of death and constant dread. It is a headdress much desired, and yet art sure 'tis worth the danger to the head. 'Twere best for thee to hide thy face from those that long for thee, The conqueror's reward is never worth the army's long-drawn woes, worth fire and sword. Ah, seek the treasure of a mind at rest, and store it in the treasury of ease. Not worth a loyal heart, a tranquil beast, were all the riches of thy lands and seas. Ah, scorn like Hafiz the delights of earth. Ask not one grain of favour from the base. 200 sacks of jewels were not worth thy soul's disgrace. "22. The rose is not fair without the beloved's face, nor merry the spring without the sweet laughter of wine. The path through the fields and winds from a flower-strewn place, without her bright cheek, which glows like a tulip fine, nor winds softly blowing, fields deep in corn are fair. And lips, like to sugar, grace like a flower that sways, are naught without kisses, many and dalliance sweet. If thousands of voices sang not the rose's praise, the joy of the cypress, her opening bud to greet, nor dancing of boughs nor blossoming rose were fair. Thou limned by most skilful fingers, no pictures please, unless the beloved's image is drawn therein. The garden and flowers, and hair flowing loose on the breeze, unless to my lady's side I may strive and win, nor garden, nor flowers, nor loose flying curls are fair. Hast seen at a marriage feast, when the mirth runs high, the revellers scatter gold with a careless hand? The gold of thy heart, O Hafiz, despised doth lie, not worthy thy love to be cast by a drunken band at the feet of her who is fairer than all that's fair. 23. My lady, that did change this house of mine into a heaven, when that she dwelt therein, from head to foot an angel's grace divine enwrapped her, pure she was, spotless of sin. Fair as the moon in her countenance, and wise, lords of the kind and tender glance, her eyes with an abounding loveliness did shine. Then said my heart, here will I take my rest. This city breathes her love in every part. But to a distant bourne was she addressed. Alas, he knew it not. Alas, poor heart. The influence of some cold malignant star has loosed my hand that held her lone and far. She journeyeth that lay upon my breast. Not only did she lift my bosom's veil, reveal its inmost secret, but her grace drew back the curtain from heaven's mansions pale, and gave her there an eternal dwelling place. The flower-strewn river lip and meadows fair, the rose herself but fleeting treasures where regret and winter follow in their trail. Dear were the days which perished with my friend. Ah, what is left of life now she is dead? All wisdomless and profitless I spend. The nightingale his own life's blood doth shed, when to the kisses of the wind the morn unveils the rose's splendour. With his torn and jealous breast he dyes her petals red. Yet pardon her, O heart, for poor wert thou, a humble dervish on the dusty way. Crowned with the crown of empire was her brow, and in the realms of beauty she bore sway. But all the joy that Hafiz's hand might hold lay in the beads that morn and eve he told, worn with God's praise, and see, he holds it now. 24. Not one is filled with madness like to mine. In all the taverns my soiled robe lies here. There my neglected book, both pledged for wine. With dust my heart is thick, that should be clear, a glass to mirror forth the great king's face. One ray of light from out thy dwelling place, to pierce my night, O God, and draw me near. From out mine eyes onto my garment's hem a river flows. Perchance my cypress tree beside that stream may rear her lofty stem, watering her roots with tears. Ah, bring to me the wine vessel, since my love's cheek is hid. A flood of grief comes from my heart unbid, and turns mine eyes into a bitter sea. Nay, by the hand that sells me wine I vow, No more the brimming cup shall touch my lips, until my mistress, with her radiant brow, adorns my feast until love's secret slips from her as from the candle's tongue of flame, though I, the singed moth, for very shame, dare not extol love's light without eclipse. Red wine I worship, and I worship her, speak not to me of anything beside, for naught but these on earth or heaven I care. What though the proud narcissus flowers defied thy shining eyes to prove themselves more bright? Yet heed them not, those that are clear of sight, follow not them to whom all light's denied. Before the tavern door a Christian sang, to sound of pipe and drum, what time the earth awaited the white dawn and gaily rang. Upon mine ear those harbingers of mirth, if the true faith be such as thou dost say, alas, my Hafiz, that this sweet today should bring unknown tomorrow to birth. 25. The days of absence and the bitter nights of separation, all are at an end. Where is the influence of the star that blights my hope? The omen answers at an end. Autumn's abundance, creeping autumn's mirth, are ended and forgot, when o'er the earth the wind of spring with soft warm feet doth wend. The day of hope, hid beneath sorrow's veil, has shown its face. Ah, cry, that all may hear, come forth, the powers of night no more prevail. Praise be to God, now that the rose is near, with long desired and flaming coronet, the cruel stinging thorns all men forget, the wind of winter ends its proud career. The long confusion of the nights that wear, anguish that dwelt within my heart is o'er. Neath the protection of my lady's hair, grief nor disquiet come to me no more. What though her curls wrought all my misery, my lady's gracious face can comfort me, and at the end give what I sorrow for. Light-hearted to the tavern let me go, where laughs the pipe, the merry cymbals kiss. Under the history of all my woe, my mistress sets her hand and writes, Finis. Oh, linger not, nor trust the inconstant days, that promised, where thou art thy lady stays. The tale of separation ends with this. Joy's certain path, O Saki, thou hast shown. Long may thy cup be full, thy days be fair. Trouble and sickness from my breast have flown. Order and health thy wisdom marshals there. Not one that numbered Hafiz's name among the great unnumbered, where his tears unsung. Praise him that sets an end to endless care. 26. The secret draught of wine and love repressed are joys foundationless. Then come whate'er may come, slave to the grape, I stand confessed. Unloose, O friend, the knot of thy heart's care, despite the warning that the heavens reveal. For all his thought, never astronomer, that loosed the knot of fate those heavens conceal. Not all the changes that thy days unfold shall rouse thy wonder, time's revolving sphere, over 1,000 lives like thine has rolled. That cup within thy fingers dost not hear the voices of dead kings speak through the clay. Kobad, Bachman, Jemshid, there dost his hear. Gently upon me set thy lips, they say. What man can tell where Kaus and Kai have gone? Who knows where even now the restless wind scatters the dust of Jem's imperial throne? And where's the tulip following close behind? The feet of spring, her scarlet chalice rears. There Farhad for the love of Shirin pined, dyeing the desert red with his heart's tears. Bring the cup, drink we while yet we may, to our soul's ruin the forbidden draught. Perhaps a treasure trove is hid away among those ruins where the wine has laughed. Perhaps the tulip knows the fickleness of fortune's smile, for on her stalk's green shaft she bears a wine cup through the wilderness. The murmuring stream of Ruknabad, the breeze that blows from out Masala's fair pleasaunce, summon me back when I would seek heart's ease, travelling afar. What though love's countenance be turned full harsh and sorrowful on me? I care not so that time's unfriendly glance still from my lady's beauty turned be. Like Hafiz, drain the goblet cheerfully, while minstrels touch the lute and sweetly sing, for all that makes thy heart rejoice in thee hangs of life's single slender silken string. "27. My friend has fled, alas, my friend has fled, and left me naught but tears and pain behind. Like smoke above a flame caught by the wind, so rose she from my breast, and forth she sped. Drunk with desire, I seized love's cup divine, but she that held it poured the bitter wine of separation into it, and fled. The hunter she, and I the helpless prey, wounded and sick, round me her toils she drew, my heart into a sea of sorrow threw, bound up her camel loads, and fled away. Fain had I laid an ambush for her soul, she saw and vanished, and the timid foal, good fortune, slipped the rein, and would not stay. My heart was all too narrow for my woe, and tears of blood my weeping eyes have shed, a crimson stream across the desert sped, rising from out my sad heart's overflow. She knew not what love's meanest slave can tell, 'tis sweet to serve, but threw me a farewell. Kissing my threshold, turned and cried, I go, stayed but to fill its song. In the clear dawn, before the east was red, before the rose had torn her veil in two, a nightingale through Hafiz's garden flew, stayed but to fill its song with tears, and fled. 28. Hast thou forgotten, when thy stolen glance was turned to me, when on my happy face clearly thy love was writ, with doth enhance all happiness? Or when my sore disgrace, hast thou forgot, drew from thine eyes reproof, and made thee hold thy sweet red lips aloof, dowered like Jesus' breath with healing grace? Hast thou forgotten how the glorious, swift nights flew past, the cup of dawn brimmed high? My love and I alone, God favouring us. And when she like a waning moon did lie, and steep had drawn his coif about her brow, hast thou forgot? Heaven's crescent moon would bow the head, and in her service pace the sky. Hast thou forgotten, when a sojourner within the tavern gates and drunk with wine, I found love's passionate wisdom hidden there, which in the mosque none even now divine? The goblet's carbuncle, hast thou forgot? Laughed out loud, and speech flew hot and fast between thy ruby lips and mine. Hast thou forgotten, when thy cheek's dear torch lighted the beacon of desire in me, and when my heart, like foolish moths that scorch their wings and yet return, turned all to thee? Within the banquet hall of good repute, hast thou forgot, the wine's self-repressed my suit, and filled the morn with drunken jollity? Hast thou forgotten, when thou laidst aright the uncut gems of Hafiz's inmost thought, and side by side they sweet care strung the bright array of verse on verse? Hast thou forgot? 29. From Canaan Joseph shall return, whose face a little time was hidden. Weep no more. Oh, weep no more, in sorrow's dwelling place. The roses yet shall spring from the bare floor, and heart bowed down beneath a secret pain. O stricken heart, joy shall return again, peace to the love-tossed brain. Oh, weep no more. Oh, weep no more. For once again life's spring shall throne her in the meadows green, and o'er her head the minstrel of the night shall fling a canopy of rose leaves, score on score. The secret of the world thou shalt not learn, and yet behind the veil love's fire may burn. Weep'st thou? Let hope return, and weep no more. Today may pass, tomorrow pass, before the turning wheel give me my heart's desire. Heaven's self shall change and turn not evermore, the universal wheel of fate in ire. O pilgrim, nearing Mecca's holy fane, the thorny Macklin wounds thee in vain. The desert blooms again, O weep no more. What thou, the river of mortality, round the unstable house of life doth roar, weep not, O heart, Noah shall pilot thee, and guide thine ark to the desired shore. The goal lies far, and perilous is thy road, yet every path leads to the same abode. Where thou shalt drop thy load, O weep no more. Mine enemies have persecuted me, my love has turned and fled from out my door. God counts our tears, and knows our misery. Ah, weep not, he has heard thy weeping sore, and chained in poverty, and plunged in night. O Hafiz, take thy Koran and recite litanies infinite, and weep no more. Litanies infinite, and weep no more. .30. All hail Shiraz, hail, O sight without peer. May God be the watchman before thy gate, that the feet of misfortune enter not here. Lest my Ruknabad be left desolate, 100 times, God forbid, I pray. Its limpid stream, where the shadows wait, like the fount of Khazir, giveth life for aye. Twixt Jaffrabad and Masala's close flies the north wind laden with ambergris. O come to Shiraz when the north wind blows. There abideth the angel Gabriel's peace, with him who is lord of its treasures. The fame of the sugar of Egypt shall fade and cease, for the breath of our beauties has put it to shame. O wind that blows from the sun rising, what news of the maid with the drunken eyes, what news of the lovely maid dost thou bring? Bid me not wake from my dream and arise. In dreams I have rested my head at her feet. When stillness unbroken around me lies, the vision of her makes my solitude sweet. If for the wine the cup-bearer pour forth my blood, as the milk from a mother's bosom flows, at his word let my heart yield its crimson flood. But Hafiz, Hafiz, thou art of those for ever fearing lest absence be near. For the days when thou heldst the beloved close, why rise not thy thanks so that all may hear? .31. The breath of dawn's musk-strewing wind shall blow. The ancient world shall turn to youth again, and other wines from out spring's chalice flow. Wine red the Judas tree shall set before the pure white jessamine, a brimming cup, and wind flowers lift their scarlet chalice up for the star-pale Narcissus to adore. The long-drawn tyranny of grief shall pass, parting shall end in meeting, the lament of the sad bird that sang, alas, alas, shall reach the rose in her red curtained tent. Forth from the mosque, the tavern calls to me, wouldst hinder us? The preacher's homily is long, but life will soon be spent. Ah, foolish heart, the pleasures of today, if thou abandon, will tomorrow stand? Thy surety for the gold thou'st thrown away? In Shahaban, the troops of grief disband, and crown the hours with wine's red coronet. The sun of merriment ere long will set, and meagre Ramazan is close at hand. Dear is the rose, now her sweets proclaim, while yet the purple petals blush and blow. Hither adown the path of spring she came, and by the path of autumn she will go. Now, while we listen, minstrel, tune thy lay. Thyself hast said, the present steals away, the future comes, and bringing, what? Dost know? Summoned by thy melody did Hafiz rise, out of the darkness near thy lips to twirl. Back to the dark again his pathway lies. Sing out, sing clear, and singing cry, farewell. 32. Upon a branch of the straight cypress tree, once more the patient nightingale doth rest. O rose, he cries, evil be turned from thee. I sing thee all men's thanks, thou blossomest, and hope springs up in every joyless heart. Let not the nightingale lament apart, nor with thy proud thorns wound his faithful breast. I will not mourn my woeful banishment. He that has hungered for his lady's face shall, when she cometh, know a great content. The zealot seeks a heavenly dwelling place, Hurries to welcome him in paradise. Here at the tavern gate my heaven lies. I need no welcome but my lady's grace. Better to drink red wine than tears, say I, while the lute sings, and if one bid thee cease, God is the merciful, thou shalt reply. To some life brings but joy and endless ease. Ah, let them laugh, although the jest be vain. For me the source of pleasure lay in pain, and weeping for my lady I found peace. Hafiz, why art thou ever telling o'er the tale of absence and of sorrow's night? Knowest thou not that parting goes before all meeting, and from darkness comes the light? 33. The jewel of the secret treasury is still the same as once it was. The seal upon love's treasure casket and the key are still what thieves can neither break nor steal. Still among lovers loyalty is found, and therefore faithful eyes still strew the ground with the same pearls that mine once strewed for thee. Question the wandering winds, and thou shalt know that from the dusk until the dawn doth break, my consolation is that they still blow. The perfume of thy curls across my cheek, a dart from thy bent brows has wounded me. Ah, come, my heart still waiteth helplessly, has waited ever till thou heal its pain. If seekers after rubies there were none, still to the dark mines where the gems had lain, would pierce, as he was wont, the radiant sun. Setting the stones ablaze, wouldst hide the stain of my heart's blood? Blood red the ruby glows, and whence it came my wounded bosom knows, upon thy lips to show what thou hast done. Let not thy curls waylay my pilgrim soul, as robbers use, and plunder me no more. Years join dead year, but thine extortionate rule is still the same merciless as before. Sing, Hafiz, sing again of eyes that weep, for still the fountain of our tears is deep, as once it was, and still with tears is full. 34. Last night I dreamed that angels stood without the tavern door and knocked in vain and wept. They took the clay of Adam and methought moulded a cup therewith while all men slept. O dwellers in the halls of chastity, you brought love's passionate red wine to me. Down to the dust I am, your bright feet stepped. For heaven's self was all too weak to bear the burden of his love God laid on it. He turned to seek a messenger elsewhere, and in the book of fate my name was writ. Between my Lord and me such concord lies, as makes the Hurus glad in paradise, with songs of praise through the green glades they flit. 100 dreams of fancy's garnered store assail me. Father Adam went astray, tempted by one poor grain of corn. Wherefore, absolve and pardon him that turns away, though the soft breath of truth reaches his ears. For 72 jangling creeds he hears, and loud-voiced fable calls him ceaselessly. That is not the flame of love's true fire, which makes the torchlight shadow dance in rings, but where the radiance draws the moth's desire, and send him forth with scorched and drooping wings. The heart of one who dwells retired shall break, remembering a black mole and a red cheek, and his life ebb sapped at its secret springs. Yet since the earliest time that man has sought to comb the locks of speech, his goodly bride, not one like Hafiz from the face of thought has torn the veil of ignorance aside. 35. Forget not when dear friend to friend returned, Forget not days gone by, forget them not. My mouth has tasted bitterness, and learned to drink the envenomed cup of mortal lot. Forget not, when a sweeter draught was mine, loud rose the songs of them that drank that wine. Forget them not. Forget not loyal lovers long since dead, though faith and loyalty should be forgot, though the earth cover the enamoured head, and in the dust wisdom and passion rot. My friends have thrust me from their memory, vainly 1,000,000 times I cry, forget me not. Weary, I turn me to my bonds again, once there were hands strong to deliver me, forget not when they broke a poor slave's chain. Though from mine eyes tears flow unceasingly, I think on them whose rose gardens are set beside the Zenda Rud, and I forget life's misery. Sorrow has made her lair in my breast, and disturbed she lies, forget them not, that drove her forth like to a hunted beast. Hafiz, thou and thy tears shall be forgot, lock fast the gates of thy sad heart, but those that held the key to thine unspoken woes, forget them not. "36. Beloved, who has bid thee ask no more how fares my life? Play the enemy, and ask not where he dwells, that was thy friend? Thou art the breath of mercy passing o'er the whole wide world, and the offender, I. Ah, let the rift my tears have channeled end, question the past no more. If thou wouldst know the secret of love's fire, it shall be manifest unto thine eyes. Question the torch flame burning steadfastly, but ask no more the sweet wind's wayward choir. Ask me of faith and love that never dies. Darius, Alexander's sovereignty, I sing of those no more. Ask not the monk to give thee truth's pure gold. He hides no riches neath his lying guise. And ask not him to teach thee alchemy, whose treasure houses bear his hearthstone cold. Ask to what goal the wandering dervish hies, that knew not his desire who counselled thee. Question his rags no more. And in their learned books thou'lt seek in vain the key to love's locked gateway. Heart grown wise in pain and sorrow, ask no remedy. But when the time of roses comes again, take what it gives, O Hafiz, ere it flies, and ask not why the hour has brought it thee, and wherefore ask no more. "37. Arise, and fill a golden goblet up, until the wine of pleasure overflow, before into thy skull's pale empty cup a grimmer cupbearer the dust shall throw. Yea, to the vale of silence we must come. Yet shall the flagon laugh, and heaven's dome thrill with an answering echo ere we go. Thou knowest that the riches of this field make no abiding. Let the goblet's fire consume the fleeting harvest earth may yield. O cypress tree, green home of love's sweet choir, when I unto the dust have passed, forget thy former wantonness and cast thy shadow o'er the dust of my desire. Flow, bitter tears, and wash me clean, for they, whose feet are set upon the road that lies, twixt earth and heaven thou shalt be pure, they say. Before unto the pure thou lift thine eyes, seeing but himself, the zealot sees but sin. Grief to the mirror of his soul let in, O Lord, and cloud it with the breath of sighs. No tainted eye shall gaze upon her face, no glass but that of an unsullied heart shall dare reflect my lady's perfect grace. Though, like the snakes that from the herbage start, thy curling locks have wounded me full sore, thy red lips hold the power of the bezoar. Ah, touch and heat me where I lie apart. And when from her the wind blows perfume sweet, tear, Hafiz, like the rose, thy robe in two, and cast thy rags beneath her flying feet, to deck the place thy mistress passes through. "38. I cease not from desire, till my desire is satisfied, or let my mouth attain my love's red mouth, or let my soul expire, sighed from those lips that sought her lips in vain. Others may find another love as fair, Upon her threshold I have laid my head. The dust shall cover me, still lying there, when from my body life and love have fled. My soul is on my lips, ready to fly, but grief beats in my heart and will not cease, because not once before I die will her sweet lips give all my longing peace. My breath is narrowed down to one long sigh, for a red mouth that burns my thoughts like fire. When will that mouth draw near and make reply to one whose life is straitened with desire? When I am dead, open my grave and see the cloud of smoke that rises round thy feet. In my dead heart the fire still burns for thee. Yea, the smoke rises from my winding sheet. Ah, come, beloved, for the meadows wait thy coming, and the thorn bears flowers instead of thorns, the cypress fruit, and desolate, bare winter from before thy steps has fled. Hoping within some garden ground to find a red rose soft and sweet as thy soft cheek. Through every meadow blows the western wind, through every garden he is fain to seek. Reveal thy face, that the whole world may be bewildered by the radiant loveliness. The cry of man and woman comes to thee. Open thy lips and comfort their distress. Each curling lock of thy luxuriant hair breaks into barbed hooks to catch my heart. My broken heart is wounded everywhere, with countless wounds from which the red drops start. Yet when sad lovers meet and tell their sighs, not without praise shall Hafiz' name be said, not without tears in those pale companies where joy has been forgot and hope has fled. 39. Cypress and tulip and sweet eglantine, of these the tale from lip to lip is sent. Washed by 3 cups, O Saki, of thy wine, my song shall turn upon this argument. Spring, bride of all the meadows, rises up, clothed in her ripest beauty. Fill the cup of spring's handmaidens runs this song of mine. The sugar-loving birds of distant Ind accept a Persian sweetmeat that was brought to fair Bengal, have found naught to their mind. See how my song, that in one night was wrought, defies the limits set by space and time. O'er plains and mountain tops my fearless rhyme, child of a night, its year-long road shall find. And thou whose sense is dimmed with piety, thou too shalt learn the magic of her eyes. Forth comes the caravan of sorcery, when from those gates the blue-veined curtains rise, and when she walks the flowery meadows through, upon the jasmine's shamed cheek the dew gathers like sweat, she is so fair to see. Ah, swerve not from the path of righteousness, though the world lure thee like a wrinkled crone. Hiding beneath her robe lasciviousness, she plunders them that pause and heed her moan. From Sinai Moses brings thee wealth untold. Bow not thine head before the calf of gold, like Samir following after wickedness. From the Shah's garden blows the wind of spring, the tulip in her lifted chalice bears a dewy wine of heaven's ministering, until Ghiyasuddin the Sultan hears. Sing, Hafiz, of thy longing for his face. The breezes whispering round thy dwelling place shall carry thy lament unto the king. 40. The margin of a stream, the willow's shade, a mind inclined to song, a mistress sweet, a cupbearer whose cheek outshines the rose, a friend upon whose heart thy heart is laid. O happy starred, let not thine hours fleet, unvalued. May each minute as it goes lay tribute of enjoyment at thy feet, that thou mayest live and know thy life is sweet. Let every one upon whose heart desire for a fair face lies like a burden sore, that all his hopes may reach their goal unchecked through branches of wild rue upon his fire. My soul is like a bride with a rich store of maiden thoughts and jewelled fancies decked, and in time's gallery I yet may meet some picture meant for me, some image sweet. Give thanks for nights spent in good company, and take the gifts a tranquil mind may bring. No heart is dark when the kind moon doth shine, and grass-grown river banks are fair to see. The Saki's radiant eyes, God-favouring, are like a wine cup brimming o'er with wine, and him my drunken sense goes out to greet, for e'en the pain he leaves behind is sweet. Hafiz, thy life has sped untouched by care, with me towards the tavern turn thy feet. The fairest robbers thou'll encounter there, and they will teach thee what to learn is sweet. 41. The days of spring are here. The eglantine, the rose, the tulip from the dust have risen. And thou, why liest thou beneath the dust? Like the full clouds of spring, these eyes of mine shall scatter tears upon the grave thy prison, till thou too from the earth thine head shalt thrust. 42. True love has vanished from every heart. What has befallen all lovers fair? When did the bonds of friendship part? What has befallen the friends that were? Ah, why are the feet of Kezia lingering? The waters of life are no longer clear. The purple rose has turned pale with fear. And what has befallen the wind of spring? None now saith, a love was mine, loyal and wise to dispel my care. None remembers love's right divine. What has befallen all lovers fair? In the midst of the field, to the player's feet, the ball of God's favour and mercy came, but none has leapt forth to renew the game. What has befallen the horsemen fleet? Roses have bloomed, yet no bird rejoiced, no vibrating throat has rung with the tale. What can have silenced the hundred-voiced? What has befallen the nightingale? Heaven's music is hushed, and the planets roll. In silence has Zora broken her lute. There is none to press out the vine's ripe fruit, and what has befallen the foaming bowl? A city where kings are but lovers crowned, a land from the dust of which friendship springs. Who has laid waste that enchanted ground? What has befallen the city of kings? Years have passed since a ruby was won. From the mine of manhood they labour in vain. The fleet-footed wind and the quickening rain, and what has befallen the light of the sun? Hafiz, the secret of God's dread task, no man knoweth, in youth or prime, or in wisest age, of whom wouldst thou ask? What has befallen the wheels of time? 43. Where are the tidings of union, that I may arise? Forth from the dust I will rise up to welcome thee. My soul, like a homing bird yearning for paradise, shall arise and soar from the snares of the world set free. When the voice of thy love shall call me to be thy slave, I shall rise to a greater far than the mastery. Of life and of the living, time and the mortal span, pour down, O Lord, from the clouds of thy guiding grace. The rain of a mercy that quickeneth on my grave, before, like dust that the wind bears from place to place, I arise and flee beyond the knowledge of man. When to my grave thou turnest thy blessed feet, wine and the lute thou shalt bring in thine hand to me. Thy voice shall ring through the folds of my winding sheet, and I will arise and dance to thy minstrelsy. Though I be old, clasp me one night to thy breast, and I, when the dawn shall come to awaken me, with the flush of youth on my cheek, from thy bosom will rise. Rise up, let mine eyes delight in thy stately grace. Thou art the goal to which all men's endeavour has pressed, and thou the idol of Hafiz's worship thy face. From the world and life shall bid him come forth and arise.